everyone. I'm very happy that you're here to listen to my presentation about the introduction into Cradle2Cradle. I want to start this presentation off with my favorite quote from the C2C founders. A building like a tree, a city like a forest. Right now this might seem a bit out of context, but along the presentation it will make a lot of sense. So let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Alexa Bresan and I'm currently writing my master thesis to complete my studies in international business in Cologne. I decided to use the opportunity and go on a semester abroad in the meanwhile. Therefore, I'm currently in Turku, Finland at the Turku University of Applied Sciences. I personally strongly support the Cradle2Cradle idea and I have been engaging in it for the last year. This has led me to write my master thesis on Cradle2Cradle. My topic is specifically dealing with the intermediary role of external consultants in the creation of supply chain transparency in the context of the Cradle2Cradle product certification. So let's start with a short brainstorming. I want to ask you, what have you already heard about Cradle2Cradle? Or if you haven't heard anything about it yet, what do you think could stand behind the term? To give you a short overview of the course of the presentation, I've prepared this structure. First, I will introduce you into the emergence of the Cradle2Cradle framework. To then talk about the underlying principles. What is the fundamental thought behind Cradle2Cradle? Afterwards, we will move on to practical examples, considering how companies are applying the C2C principles. At the end, I would like to have a small discussion with you about the differences and similarities between Cradle2Cradle and circular economy concepts. So let's start with the emergence of the Cradle2Cradle framework. The chemist and the architect have a vision of the new industrial revolution. C2C itself is definitely challenging most of the already performed sustainability actions and standards, like, for example, eco-efficiency approaches or the triple bottom line. The name Cradle2Cradle itself challenges the cradle-to-grave approach, where it's criticizing the linear take, make, waste approach. Therefore, Cradle2Cradle is a circular economy framework, but with special requirements. So the initial idea of Cradle2Cradle came from Michael Braungart, who is a chemist, and this is still very apparent. He realized that there are so many chemicals in use in our everyday products, which are both hazardous for people and planet. And mostly they are even unnecessary, meaning the chemicals are not even needed in the products for its technical propositions and so on. Therefore, Cradle2Cradle tries to tackle the often neglected toxicity of products before, during, and also after their use. We will come to how this chemical background is applied in the C2C framework. C2C is, by the way, the abbreviation of Cradle2Cradle. I will maybe use it a few times. How it's applied in the C2C framework later a lot. The second founder is William McDonough. He is an architect, and this influence is also still very apparent in the whole application because C2C focuses a lot on the construction industry as well. So together, Michael Braungart and William McDonough claimed that with an improvement of the old way of thinking, we cannot solve today's environmental problems in the long run. We rather need a new industrial revolution. So how did they build up the C2C concept to be a successful and also globally applied standard? EPEA was founded in 1987 by Michael Braungart. EPEA stands for Environmental Protection Encouragement Agency. This is an organization to consult companies during their transformation of products and also to help them certify their products. About the book and also the workshop with Ellen MacArthur, I will talk later a bit about. And then the next step is in 2010, where the Cradle2Cradle Product Innovation Institute in the USA was founded. It is It was founded to manage the development and certification of the Cradle2Cradle certified product standard. So it was founded as an independent and non-profit institute. In 2013, after EPEA was also established in other countries worldwide, EPEA Germany merged together or started a cooperation with Dres and Summers, which again enforces the activity in the constructions industry. So now I want to finally tell you what C2C is really about. So what are the three main principles that build the fundament of the whole framework? I will quickly introduce you to each of the three principles, and each of them will be represented in examples and cases several times along the presentation as well. So the first principle, waste equals food. This mainly refers to the fact that waste should not be considered as something to avoid. The concept of waste should rather be eliminated when waste is instead considered as food within two different cycles. These two different cycles are the biological cycle on the one hand and the technical cycle on the other. I will later talk more in detail about this one. So we will move over to the next principle, which is the use of current solar income. This basically claims that we have an infinite energy supply naturally the whole time. We just need to use it effectively. And this means we should definitely replace fossil fuels by clean energies, because even if you have a healthy product that is environmentally friendly, if the energy you produce it with or the energy you use it with is not clean, is not renewable, then the impact is still negative on the environment. The third principle is maybe a bit more vague because it is named the celebration of diversity, but it is for sure not only referring to biodiversity. Diversity here rather means also diversity in cultures, diversity in desires. So it is all about not letting monotony win over the richness billions of years of evolution have actually gifted to us. So it is generally important to not only produce standard-sized products, but rather adapt them to local requirements, to local resources and possibilities. To give you a short example about this one, we can have a look at laundry detergents. So right now, these laundry detergents are basically sold in a standard size to, for example, the whole US, let's say. But the water quality in the US, for example, comparing east side and west side to one another, differs a lot and would actually require different chemicals in this water detergent. So if we only adapted laundry detergents to the east and to the west of US, we would be able to decrease the net needed chemicals in the laundry detergents by a lot. So this is just an example that you should always think of the concept of the context that the products will be used and not only sell standard sized products. So the third principle refers also to challenging, for example, production processes and inputs, and just in general, the old way of thinking, and that we should rather have a look at the diverse opportunities that nature is already applying around us, but also maybe in terms of creating new business models. So applying these three principles, we can move from eco-efficiency towards eco-effectiveness. And what this is, I will explain you now. You might probably be familiar with such graphics, as it is quite similar to the concept of negative economic impact, sustainability, restorative and regenerative management. But sustainability is also actually nothing we want to achieve. So Cradle2Cradle encourages that humanity should consider itself as a part of the world and the nature again. This means we shouldn't consider ourselves and our behavior as inherently bad for nature in a way that we only try to reduce negative impact, the negative impact we have on the planet. You can see this displayed here in red on the graphic. This is just minimizing the negative impact on the planet. But instead of reducing our negative footprint, we should actually start creating a positive footprint. Because first of all, in the long run, this eco-efficiency of simply decreasing the negative footprint will not be enough, because companies that become more efficient will also grow more in the end. And a lot of critics therefore focus on the growth aspect as the black sheep in environmental destruction, claiming that the world population should stop growing or should decrease, and the economy has to receive other incentives that are not based on growth. Cradle2Cradle, however, suggests that the growth is not a problem in itself. If every human would behave in an eco-effective way from the beginning. A very common example that is given in C2C are here ants, because ants altogether actually have more biomass than humans altogether have. Still, ants don't have a negative impact on the planet because they convert biomass into nutrients. And we as humans are actually able to do the same, and therefore even have a positive footprint instead of just trying to not have an impact at all on the planet. So we want to achieve a situation where we don't want to focus on less bad, because less bad is not good in the end. Eco-efficiency seems like a win-win situation in the beginning, because most of the measures will not only be less harmful to environment and people, but also will have a positive impact on the companies or on the firms' turnover and wins, because eco-efficiency is commonly defined as strategies that focus on maintaining or increasing the value of economic output. So this is the one side where it's having a positive impact, while simultaneously decreasing the impact of economic activity upon ecological systems. And there you have to say, effectiveness is not always efficient, but this is not a problem. And let me give you the, let's say, main example or metaphor that Cradle2Cradle always uses, which is the cherry tree, because the cherry tree is not at all efficient. It produces only very few seeds, but produces hundreds and hundreds of blossoms every year. So in that way, it is not efficient at all, but it's not a problem, because the blossoms that are not efficient, as said, are not waste as we define it, but they are rather a nutrient. And in the meanwhile, while producing these nutrients, the cherry tree also produces oxygen and cleans the air in the meantime. So we have to focus on being more like the cherry tree, instead of being more efficient, but being a nutrient for the planet. So let's compare eco-efficiency to eco-effectiveness. Eco-efficiency is always a lot about reduction and minimization of, for example, waste or energy usage or the pollution of water and air. While eco-effectiveness, as in the cherry tree example already claimed, says that waste, energy consumption and production are not inherently bad as long as they are not harmful or even a nutrient. And also, like in eco-efficiency, using fewer toxic substances is not the goal. It is more important to define from the beginning what the intended use of these substances in the product is. So Cradle2Cradle actually claims that it is important to have something like a product passport to say what is in this product, what chemicals are inside that might be harmful, but only in specific contexts. So the product passport defines how can the product be used even after its lifetime. Then eco-efficiency, of course, is also a lot focusing still on linear material flows. Or if it's not focusing on linear material flows, it is considered the recycling it uses is rather downcycling most of the times, or while the recycling process, there are toxicological elements freed up. In Cradle2Cradle, or eco-effectiveness, circular material flows are the main thought or the main fundament of cradle to cradle. So recycling should always be done in a way where the quality of the raw materials is not decreased. In the best scenario, the quality is even improved. I can give you a short example of an innovation that is coming where PET plastic, like we have it in PET bottles, it often contains antimony, and there's actually a new recycling process that found a way to take this antimony out of the PET, because this antimony is not having it used to be a catalyst, but it is not having a sense of being in there anymore, and it is very toxic. And therefore this is a common example of a good approach to upcycling materials to increase the quality of this PET plastic through recycling. So in the end, eco-efficiency is all about making the wrong things perfect, but this is not what we want to achieve. We want to do the right things from the start on. So now I want to deep dive more into the two different cycles in which nutrients can flow. This is the biological cycle on the one hand, or also called biosphere, and the technical cycle on the other hand, also called technosphere. In the biological cycle, it's all about consumer goods. So goods we use, goods that will probably enter back into the environment, like for example, shampoo does when it goes back into the water system. Therefore, it is very important in the biological cycle that it's designed with its life cycle in mind from the beginning. So it is made from renewable sources that can go back to the environment without any problems, without containing any harmful chemicals. One nice example of this is an idea that, for example, the packaging of an ice cream could be designed in a way where it dissolves into its natural ingredients again as soon as it reaches a certain temperature. This would mean that you can simply throw it away outside and it will dissolve into soil again. And then additionally, if we put seeds into this packaging, it would even be a nutrient to the biological cycle again. The technical cycle, on the other hand, is about service products, so consumer durable goods, like for example, washing machines or chairs. We don't consume these, we just use it. Therefore, those products are made from renewable or also non-renewable resources like metals, glass, or plastics, which can be used forever actually. Once such material enters into an industrial take-back recycling system, this will recover the materials at the same quality level again and again. So the idea is that, for example, metals can be recycled over and over again without decreasing their quality. For example, washing machines today are built to last about 50 years. This means that the materials used for building such washing machines are as durable as possible, but also as cheap as possible, because the manufacturer knows that he will not get these materials back, because the washing machine lasts for 50 years and there are no industrial take-back recycling systems in place. So if we would design a new business model, and if washing machines weren't sold, but only the use of these washing machines, like for example, for 3,000 washers, this would mean that the manufacturer knows that he will get the washing machines back, so he will be able to also get back all of the materials. Therefore, he could use way higher quality materials and wouldn't have to use the cheapest one, because he can reuse those materials over and over again and put them into newer models, which are most likely better, and therefore also enforcing innovation. Because for the technical cycle, it is also very important that the materials are not locked in, because they are needed for the technical cycle to enter it over, to stay in it basically. One thing we just need to take a look at is that we don't create monster hybrids. Such monster hybrids are when either biological and technical cycle materials are mixed up and put together in a way where they can't be disassembled anymore, or also different materials within the technical cycle. because, for example, cars have a lot of high quality materials, but they are put together in a way where they often cannot be disassembled anymore. Therefore, they just have to be melted. The very valuable metals have to be melted, and then it's downcycling again because the quality is decreased through the smelting process, because it fuses with other kind of metals or colors or whatever. This means design for disassembly is very important. And a good example for this could also be shoes, because shoes, when considering it, the sole should be from the biological cycle, because through walking on the streets, a lot of the rubber also already comes off and goes into the environment, which indeed produces a lot of microplastic each year by each human. Therefore, the sole should be something that can easily be composted, that can easily go into the biological cycle, while the upper part of the shoe can also be from the technical cycle and from chemicals that will, or from polymers, for example, that can go back into the technical cycle and recycled over and over again. It is just important that the sole can be easily disassembled from the upper part of the shoe. So both cycles should be beneficial for humans and ecosystems. There shouldn't be any extremely harmful chemicals in each of these, but in the technical cycle, as long as certain chemicals are locked in the material and are not freed up during any kind of recycling process or any kind of use, this can sometimes be possible. Now I want to talk about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation workshop that was taking place at IPEA, because they used this principle of the biological and the technical cycle to create this butterfly diagram of the circular economy. So this is again where you can see that Cradle2Cradle definitely is a part of the circular economy, and that Cradle2Cradle thought of mind is already applied in the circular economy framework within, for example, this butterfly diagram. Now we're moving over to the practical side. So how do companies apply Cradle2Cradle? First, one have to say that as soon as the product is Cradle2Cradle certified, this does not immediately mean that it's perfectly applying to all Cradle2Cradle principles. It is still a process of improvement, and this is especially because most of the companies want to convert a product that is already existing into a Cradle2Cradle product. This means that the materials that are already used, that have often already been used for years, have to be analyzed towards its chemical composition and everything, which is very complicated since today's supply chains are usually very, very complex and globally dispersed networks. So the suppliers are also often unwilling to give insights into all their ingredients, but these need to be analyzed. So for the consultants, it would be way easier to help the companies to achieve a Cradle2Cradle standard for products that they develop from scratch, but this is most of the times currently not the case. This is basically the topic of my master thesis. But I will tell you a bit about the Cradle2Cradle certification process now, because there are 5 categories which have to be assessed when you want to certify a Cradle2Cradle product, which is material health, material reutilization, renewable energy and carbon management, water stewardship, social fairness, and social fairness. The first 2 can be clustered into the material assessment. And here you can definitely see the chemical background of the founder, Michael BRAUNGART, again, because this is a lot about analyzing the chemical level of the product. This is the first part of the assessment also. The IPEA consultants will have a closer look at the supply chain of the company's product and will analyze it towards its material health and its material reutilization. The second step in the certification process is the process evaluation, so the latter 3 categories. And after IPEA has done this, they will create an audit report, which they will send about all of these 5 categories, which they will send to the Cradle2Cradle Product Innovation Institute in the US. They will then also get a recommendation for each of the categories which level of Cradle2Cradle should be certified, because there is a basic level, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum level for Cradle2Cradle certification. And the Product Innovation Institute will then assess which category will achieve which category certification level. You can see this in the product scorecard here on the right. And the lowest level achieved in one of the categories will then be the overall certification of the product. There also has to be a recertification done every 2 years. And this recertification also implies that there are improvements done. I want to quickly show you this case example of AHREND, just to give you an overview that Cradle2Cradle is not a normal certification, like for example ISO, which is looking at the whole company, for example, at a certain point of time. But companies will often start to certify their product at the bronze level, or certify one product at the bronze level, let's say. But they realize that they have to have a long-term strategy to get higher certifications, and then also possibly include more products of their product portfolio into the Cradle2Cradle certification. So here at AHREND, you can simply see that they have developed this Cradle2Cradle application in their product portfolio over a bit more than 10 years, very, very drastically. So the product case examples for Cradle2Cradle do not portray the perfect vision of Cradle2Cradle, but nevertheless, they are always a good step into the right direction. So for example, when we consider the technical cycle, we can look at the average home television, because this TV contains around 4,360 chemicals. And this is interesting because it's not known to us as the consumers. We have no clue about the chemical composition of our products, especially on our TVs. But the interesting thing is that it's also not known to the selling company or to the companies that produce the TV. And even additionally, after an assessment of this chemical composition was done, it became apparent that only 7 of those chemicals were needed for the technical requirements. So there were actually thousands of unnecessary chemicals inside that are potentially harmful or carcinogenic or toxic or anything. So when we want to design a TV after Cradle2Cradle standards, we have to first look at the waste equals food, which means that first of all, there can be no X chemicals included, which means chemicals that are defined by Cradle2Cradle as completely not acceptable, which is, for example, halogen or PVC, to make it possible that the TV can flow in the technical cycle safely without any harmful gassing up of chemicals during the recycling process or anything. Then it is, of course, also very important that the TV is designed for disassembly, so that the different parts, like the frame of metal maybe, or the glass, can be separated from one another, so no monster hybrids are created, and the single parts can be recycled by itself. And like this, it is the first step that it's possible that also TV, which used to contain 4,360 chemicals on average, of course, can again be a nutrient for a technical cycle over and over again. The next example is a very good one for the biological cycle. It's the Kalida 100% Nature product line, which is silver level certified pajamas, t-shirts, and also underwear for men, women, and children. This apparel is made from pure tencel, which is 100% cellulose, which means it is compostable. So you can actually, after you're done with using the product, the t-shirt, for example, you can simply throw it into your garden on the compost, and it will break down within a few months into its natural components and becomes a valuable biological nutrient again within a few months. Also, of course, not everyone has a compost in their garden. Therefore, there's also a take-back system in place from Kalida so that they can compost it. Also, the tencel during production does not have any negative impact on the water. So during the production, the water is not polluted. And in general, the water usage is very low. Now I will show you what the construction industry has to offer in terms of cradle to cradle. As I told you earlier, William McDonough is an architect, so the focus on cradle to cradle in the construction industry is also still very apparent. When it comes to buildings, it is again very important that everything depends on the context. So buildings should make use of their surroundings instead of placing the same concrete building as a closed entity anywhere. We should go back to considering how a building could both make use of its environment where it's placed and also benefit it. So buildings are a very good example for all three principles. For each principle, of course, there are various possibilities, but for example, for the first one, it is very important to use healthy materials, which are defined from the beginning for their use and also post-use, so that they can be dismantled, reused, or disposed into the biological cycle. So also here, the product passport, but for building passport, is very useful again. For the second principle, the use of current solar income, it is of course both during the production, but especially because the building is such a long-living product, here it is also during use very important that you make use of the current solar income. An example for this could be that large windows which are facing the solar south are used while isolating walls in the north. So instead of having to use air condition during the summer and heating at night, this will regulate the temperature within the building by itself, by knowing how the environment, how the situation in the special location is working. Then also for the third principle, the celebration of diversity, we have to think back that architecture used to be extremely culturally diverse and adapted to local requirements, to local resources and possibilities. Now this is being replaced by huge areas of prefabricated houses, which are all the same, not suited to the special context, to the special environment where they are built in. So we should take a step back and again consider the diverse opportunities that the locations where you build buildings offer. So through applying these principles, the healthy environment can be ensured for people and planet, because, for example, considering for people, also the indoor air pollution will be prevented through the use of healthy materials, which is actually a huge problem right now. And also illumination, which is perfectly adapted to human needs, will be considered when designing the rooms. And for the planet, the positive impact can be achieved, for example, installing a filtration system for water where it goes through layers of different plants and fungi, or where the building can create a habitat for plants and animals through, for example, rooftop greening. Another important part about Cradle to Cradle are networks, because networks are important for companies to achieve the Cradle to Cradle vision within the boundaries of the current market structure. So a good example for this is the Healthy Printing Initiative, which came into life through IPEA when they started certifying Carlsberg. They realized that there is a gap between buyers and suppliers in the ink industry. So, for example, Carlsberg would like to have a healthy ink for their products, but the ink manufacturers said that there's not enough market pressure for this. There's not enough buying volume for us to produce a healthy ink, although we as the ink suppliers would also like to do that. Therefore, IPEA bundled many different countries around the world and created a network to achieve this bigger scale, this bigger buying volume, so that the ink manufacturer was willing and was able to develop a healthy ink. The other example is the Building Material Scout. This is a service platform for sustainable construction. So it's basically a database for intelligent material pooling. It gives an overview about different sustainable inputs and materials for construction, and it also gives the opportunity to have this building passport, which I already talked about earlier, that you can define what is in the building from the start and what it should be used for, how it can be recycled in the end. How are the Cradle-to-Cradle products marketed? So first of all, effective marketing is ensured through the well-protected Cradle-to-Cradle certification standard. This is ensured through the independent nonprofit Cradle-to-Cradle Product Innovation Institute, which works as an independent accreditation body to protect the reliability and the reputation of the certification. So the certification helps the products that are most likely Cradle goods, which means that they are not accessible by the consumers even after they have used them, towards their impact on people and planet. Therefore, the certificate is a signal for a well-assessed and controlled healthy product, which means that the products cannot, or the companies that sell the products cannot simply do greenwashing. So first of all, there's a product registry on the Cradle2Cradle Product Innovation Institute website, where all of the different products that are certified are listed, also clustered through their industries and to the certification levels like bronze, silver, and so on. And then there is the Cradle2Cradle marketplace. This was brought into life by two independent founders, which really supported the Cradle2Cradle idea, but thought that the accessibility of buying those products is not easy enough. Therefore, they created this Cradle2Cradle marketplace where you can simply shop for Cradle2Cradle products. Now we're coming to the last point of the presentation, where I would like to discuss with you a bit about the differences and the similarities to the circular economy. So after I've told you now a lot about what Cradle2Cradle is, what the principles are, what eco-effectiveness is, which is the fundament for Cradle2Cradle, what do you think are the main differences and similarities you identify between Cradle2Cradle and the circular economy concepts that are known to you? So Cradle2Cradle, of course, is a form of the circular economy, which was also seen when we looked at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's butterfly diagram of the circular economy, which uses the principles of Cradle2Cradle. But the opinions in the scientific literature between the differences and the congruence of Cradle2Cradle and circular economy differ a lot. I would personally say that Cradle2Cradle is a special form of circular economy, so with special rules. It is simply has some stricter rules and has a lot of has the perspective on this effectiveness approach, which is very important. Also, the stronger chemical focus is probably a point that should be a consideration when you compare circular economy concepts and Cradle2Cradle. And that recycling should already be considered during the design stage, because now I will show you a few or two examples that show a problem when this is not done, when recycling is only done without considering it from the design stage on. So, for example, the recycling of car tires. Car tires are often recycled into rubber fields for sports. While doing sports on those fields and while the recycling process, the toxic and also, for example, carcinogenic substances in these car tires are freed up and released into the environment and are also inhaled by the people that are making sports on the rubber fields. So there's actually toxic substances which are set free into the environment, which are bad for humans and planet. The second example that comes from the industry, which has a very historical background when it comes to recycling, the paper and cartonnage industry. The problem with this is that it's a very good example of common downcycling, because paper is not only paper by itself anymore. Paper used to be wood, which is a biological renewable product that should stay in the biological cycle. But through the contamination with bleaches, with ink, the paper after recycling is not pure anymore. You can already see it because it's not white. It will mesh up and become this brown color. So the quality level decreases, which is already a sign of downcycling. But additionally to that, through this process, the chemicals from the inks, from the bleaches, have the ability to be set free. This is, for example, as you can see on the picture, for the cartonnage that is used for pizza packaging, for example, these toxic chemicals will leak into the pizza and we will eat it through the pizza. And with this, I'm coming to the recommendation I wanted to give you, which is the book that the two founders, Michael Braungart and Will McDonough, wrote. It's called Cradle2Cradle, Remaking the Way We Make Things. And I can really recommend reading this to you. And why I'm putting this also right now is because in the US, this book is already not made from paper that is made from wood anymore. In Europe, it's unfortunately not possible yet, but in the US, the paper is made out of polymers, which are non-harmful and can be recycled over and over again into the same quality paper without being decreased into a brown paper or without meshing up the ink, because also the ink was made to be rinsable from the paper, so the ink can also be recycled over and over again. So the quality will not be decreased because the polymers of this paper will not be split up. And with this recommendation as an outlook into what will be possible also hopefully soon in Europe, I want to thank you very much for your attention. It was an honor to talk about Cradle2Cradle with you today. And do you have any questions? Okay. Perfect.